from District 24, representing the towns of Rye, Greenland, Strata, Astor, Hampton, Hampton Falls, and Northampton.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Rick Ladd. I'm Representative Ladd from Haverhill, New Hampshire. I also chair House Education. I'm just thrilled to be back here.
Representative Hicks.
Thank you, Senator Ward. Matt Hicks from Maryland 24, which is Concord, beautiful work.
Glenn Cordelli, State Representative representing Tufton-Borough, Wolfboro, and Ossipee.
And I'm Ruth Ward, Chair of the Senate Education Committee and Chair of this Study Committee. So the first order of business is the approval of the minutes from June 19th, is it not? Kathy?
So moved.
So moved. Yep, so we'll start a second.
Second.
Any omissions, deletions? Anything else? All those in favor of accepting the minutes from June 10th?
Aye.
Aye.
I'll abstain, I was not present.
Okay.
Could I comment on that, maybe so?
Yes,
No,
yes,
okay.
sure.
Yes, I did read the minutes yesterday, and I must say I was very troubled by what I read. It seems to me that there was an unjustified attack on a particular school, the Immaculate Heart of Mary School, based on an article that had been written and quoting the Southern Poverty Law Center as them being a hate group. I got a kick out of that coming from the Southern Poverty Law Center. But my understanding is that the article referenced a number of people who aren't even there at the school anymore. And to attack that school, plus other schools, maybe that under the assumption that they don't take children who are LGBTQ, I think is missing a number of facts. And I think that really, since my time here, I have seen really an attack on not only on education choice, but on religion. I'm thinking back to examples at the Executive Council, examples within our own committee, in the Education Committee in the House, where a committee member was advised by someone from the other side of the aisle that they should not reference scripture from the Bible. We've seen it on the House floor, legislation really attacking nonprofit and religious schools in particular as being discriminatory. But I just, and in the article, I will pass out, this is a press release that was issued by Immaculate Heart after the initial article came out, which was actually in the King's Sentinel. And it quotes Senator Fenton as saying, it's really scary where this EFA money is going and who it's going to. For people who you know are teaching these religious issues that a lot of people don't agree with. And I would just say there are a lot of public schools that are teaching things that I don't agree with, but I'm not going to try and have them shut down. And I will point out that our Human Rights Commission laws, I'll quote 354A:18, is an exemption for religious organizations. And if I might just read it, it's just a few sentences. Nothing contained in this chapter shall be construed to bar any religious or denominational institution or organization or any organization operated for charitable or educational purposes which is operated, supervised, or controlled or in connection with a religious organization from limiting admission to or giving preference to persons of the same religion or denomination, or from making such selection as calculated by such organization to promote the religious principles for which it is established and maintained. That's in our law, and I think that it has been echoed in U.S. Supreme Court decisions just in the past 4 or 5 years, and namely Montana versus, Espinoza versus Montana Department of Revenue, and across the border in Maine, the Carson versus Malik decision, that this U.S. Supreme Court said that you cannot provide money to non-religious schools and bar religious schools from getting those public funds. There's nothing in the Constitution preventing that, and that to bar religious institutions from receiving those public funds would be discrimination. So I think that based on state law and Supreme Court decisions to attack especially religious institutions is really missing the point and is a disservice to the job that non-public schools and religious schools are doing to educate children in this state and in the country. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative Finelli. We'll put this together with the article so that we have a response. Let me just read the charge that this committee has. The committee shall monitor the implementation of RSA 194-F, including the impact of state education funding on 2 local district schools, and make recommendations for any legislative changes to the Education Freedom Savings Account program. That's what we are charged with. November is coming very soon, so I think we need to start talking about some of the things that we need to have in the report. And we have 2 reports here, one from the Scholarship Fund and one from the Department of Education. So have you had a chance to take a look at it? Let me see.
I have copies of the Department of Education report if anyone needs them.
Yep, this is this one, right?
I'm not sure. Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
And the scholarship, still a scholarship report. And I think from that, we can find out how many kids, what the money is spent, what they're doing, and we also know what the public schools have gotten this past fiscal year, not fiscal year, but the past 2 years, to be distributed to the schools. And I printed out the previous, I have 23, 24 information, and I also printed out 22, 23, just to have a comparison. So we can look at that and get some information. Now, does any one of you have any input as to what, whether or not public schools have, so we say, suffered because of the EFA?
Madam Chair.
Senator Oshawa.
So I received these, the briefing materials prior to today's committee meeting, and I was wondering 2 things. One, is there someone here that can walk us through this material? And secondly, we have a series of questions from our previous meeting in June, that are unanswered, that we really need answers to move forward with a report. So I'm not sure how you would like to address
Well, if
questions
you have-
from the previous meeting.
Right, if you have questions from the previous meeting that pertain to the church that we have, why don't you state them right now?
Well, you've got, I sent it out to the entire committee.
Yes,
We
there
had-
are.
I had questions from the previous meeting that we were told that, to the Children's Scholarship Fund Executive Director, who answered that she would need more time to get answers to those questions, and I did not receive any of those answers, so I did, as a reminder and courtesy, send them back out, and you all got a copy of that too. So I think if we have someone here who can walk us through some of this information, and we can get the answers to those questions, it might be a little more illuminating for us before we move forward with any kind of response to a report.
Thank you, Senator Archuleta. I have read your line
Yes.
of questions. And
Thank you.
I think many of them have absolutely nothing to do with what we're supposed to look at. And that's what I'm looking at. You're asking for
Which ones would those be?
graduation requirements. What is the scholarship fund process for verifying parent reimbursement requests? And it seems to me a lot of those questions are very interesting, and I think will be an interesting thing to look at, but I think as far as our charge is concerned, they are sort of extracurricular questions. And I'm really looking for what, if anything, has the EFA program for the kids with being able to pick the school that they want to go to, what has that done? Has this had a financial impact on the public schools, which is what we're looking at?
So, with regard, thank you, Madam Chair, if I may respond. I appreciate you having read 194F12, Part 3, the committee shall monitor the implementation of RSA 194F, including the impact of state education funding to local district schools. So, monitoring the implementation of our RSA 194F, I would assert that the questions that I submitted and asked in the last committee meeting are germane to the implementation of RSA 194F, because the program is designed to provide an alternative education, and yet we're not getting response as to what that education actually looks like. So if we are measuring education, if there are measures of education in what we spend in public schools, for instance, graduation, how are we measuring how that money is spent in an EFA program if we are not applying the word graduation? Are we using the program just to mark time till someone turns 18? What are the metrics? We have been charged with overseeing the implementation of the program, but we don't have any details of the program. So these questions are about the details of the program. So, what's going on? These kids are going through this program, they're using state money to get education, and so what are they getting? What are we measuring? We're only measuring some students, we're not measuring all of them. We're not finding out if our money is being spent appropriately. We're not finding out if students are actually getting an education. We're not finding out what these programs are that are being purchased. We need details about the program. just don't have yet. So that's the nature of these questions. But in relation to specifically part 3, the committee shall monitor the implementation of RSA 194F. So if we want to monitor, we have to know what we're monitoring.
Thank you for your elucidation of the importance. As far as I'm concerned, the EFA program is not a school. It is not an educational program, curriculum. It is an opportunity for kids who don't do well in whatever public school they are at, to have an opportunity to go to maybe another public school, a private school, some other entity, and my understanding is that the schools in New Hampshire are accredited and they have testing of the kids. So I don't think that if I send a child to school B versus staying in school A, that I have to worry about whether or not that child is going to get educated. There are parameters for every school. They all have to follow guidelines for education, what's being taught, and how it's being taught. So as far as I'm concerned, the EFA just allows a parent, a family, a child to go somewhere else where they're gonna have to pay tuition in order to get educated. It is not, I don't think we have to test the kids with EFA to anything differently than what we test for any child going to school. Now, if I'm totally wrong on this, I would love to find out. The Representative Ladd, you have a long experience in education.
Yes, I do. It's been very long. But you know, I've been in public education as both a elementary school teacher and school administrator, principal and administrator in several different states, Maine and Alaska. And so there are definite reasons and needs for having a program such as EFA. Not just EFA, but charter schools, homeschooling, EFAs, alternative forms of education are needed. And the reason why they're needed is not because a public school is necessarily doing something incorrectly. It's because it might not be the right fit for a particular child. And by that I mean that every child, our enrollments in the state, when I got on board here in the House, we had roughly 210,000 kids. Now we're down to 164,000 kids. And yet we have a southern part of the state where we see need for workforce housing. We want to draw in more industry that's manufacturing, technology oriented, but we need to have the labor force to do that. Any child that's not doing well in school or having a very difficult time, we all know the reasons why people leave the school, so I don't want to go that route. But I think it's important for us to know that if a parent has a child in a school and the child's just not performing well, the parent has that responsibility to provide the best possible experience for the child, or the opportunity. And there be it, they will do the walking. They will walk through the charter school. They will walk to the EFA program. They will homeschool. So I think there's a place in our society for both avenues, because we've had children in the past which haven't done well in public school, but there haven't been options, and they just floundered or dropped out. Now we can't afford to have anybody drop out. We need every one of these students available for our workforce. So I think that when we're trying to challenge, there's another point I'd like to make. We do have a teacher shortage in the state for technical education, mathematics, sciences, special education categories. And if you're in a school where the mathematics aren't being taught the way you expect them to be taught, or if you're in a school where they can't find a person to do that, you're certainly going to look for an experience where they can learn what they need. So I'm all for it. I think there's a place for both the choice schools and the public schools, because public schools might be a choice too. You may want your child going to a neighboring public school which offers something which your school doesn't. This is a part of New Hampshire of what we think, and I just, as a public school teacher and a school principal and administrator, I do support all aspects of alternative education. There's a place for it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Madam Chair?
Senator
First.
Archuleta?
Yes. So, I think I wouldn't mind if we could just background to, we're not, I don't think we're here to debate whether the program should exist or not, because that is not the charge of this committee. And understandably that there's some very big feelings about the genesis of this program and, you know, the adoption of the program. That is also outside the scope of this committee, and we are supposed to be reviewing the implementation of the program. So we're really looking, I just want to just circle us back so we use our time to concentrate on section 194F. And with respect to the chair's earlier comments, right out of the gate, the scholarship organization shall maintain an updated list of education service providers. So I think that would draw our attention to this being a education program. So it is designed to create educational opportunities for students. So what we need to do is find out, are they doing that? And are the students that are engaged in the EFA program getting education services? So that's what we're supposed to be looking at. That's the nature of the program itself. We're supposed to be overseeing whether there's substantial misuse of the funds, as in Part 9B, also in Part 11A. What is that fair process? We're looking to determine whether an intentional or substantial misuse of funds has happened. We are looking for policies. That's what we're looking for to do oversight. We are an oversight committee. So I think we can all stipulate the program exists. It's going, we're doing it, and now we need to oversee it. So again, I go back to my original question is, how are we measuring educational attainment for students who are using EFA funds? If we don't have answers to that, I would like that included in our final report. We are unable to meet the charge of the committee because we don't have metrics.
Thank you. I think that this program has the best form of accountability there is as parents. If parents are not satisfied with the education their child is getting, they have other options available to them. That is not always the case with the public school. Look at public schools. I can talk about my local district. I don't know if I should or not, but I will. The math proficiency is about 44%, and English language arts is just above 50%. I think they're both below the state targets. But many of those parents, due to means, financial resources, have no other options available to them. Parents in the Education Freedom Account or tax credit scholarship or charter schools have other options available to them. Parents in the EFA program can, as I would say, can walk. They can find another education alternative. In my mind, that's the best form of education. I always go back to a statement by famous economist and author Thomas Sowell, who said, the basic question is not what is best, but who says what is best. My answer is always parents. So I think that there is accountability, and we do have information. I believe this Scholarship Fund has provided information in the past, we can find out how many children in the EFA funds, in the EFA account program, actually leave and go back to a public school. We have that information. So they did not find the EFA program to meet their needs for one reason or another and went back to a public school. And as Representative Ladd pointed out, with the program also, tuition is an allowable expense and they can use those EFA dollars to find a different public school. So I think that there is accountability. We know that the program is successful because the program has grown. And there have been a minimal number of parents leaving the program, as I recall, to return to their resident public school. So I think that by all those measures, it has been successful, and I think that children are learning the same way we know that homeschool children learn. The accountability requirements are very similar for homeschool children, and we've seen national statistics about the great acceptance rates at college and the great performance of homeschool children who are actually being taught by parents and supplemented possibly with other forms and online education. So I think that by those same measures, we know that the Education Freedom Account program is working and is educating students. Thank you.
Representative Hicks, do you have anything to add?
Thank you, Senator Ward.
I have a question for Representative Cordelli.
Do you yield?
I so do.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Representative Cordelli.
Sure.
We all know that you are an enthusiastic supporter of the EFA program. And so in that vein, I just want to clarify that for homeschool students, there is no requirement for graduation. There's, having been a homeschool parent who went looking for metrics and looking for parameters and looking for benchmarks, that doesn't exist. That's not something that we do in New Hampshire. And the homeschool community, of which I was an active participant, actually has a very strong group of parents who want to keep it like that. They don't want to engage in public school metrics or any sort of metrics that are outside of their homeschool ethos. So, just for the sake of clarity, we don't have a homeschool graduation requirement. This just doesn't exist. In fact, once a child turns 18, there's no one has tracked them at all, period. So, we're going back to the EFAs, for which homeschool parents can access. So we are now giving government funds to families to pursue outside of public school alternative education programs. And in those alternative education programs, how do we know that those students are getting an education? How do we know? We have anecdotal evidence. We have some really lovely feel-good stories, but we have no data. How many students have reached a graduation metric? What's the metric? How do we know? Can they read at a 12th grade level? Do they have critical thinking skills? Can they do basic mathematics? Can they identify 25 countries on a map? We have no idea. So while I love, there are some great stories about homeschoolers who are really, really successful, for every one of those, there's another one where it's a wildly inappropriate choice and that student loses a lot of time. So what metrics is the EFA Oversight Committee looking for in evaluating how students graduate? What do they learn by the time they have aged out of the program or graduated? We don't even have a term for it. That's what I want to know. Where do we find that?
Okay, I have a question.
Do we have?
Okay, let's clarify.
Thank you. Yes, the 194F, I believe, is the statute, the RSA for the Education Freedom Program, and there are requirements embedded in the law as to what children need to learn, need to know. That is there, and it's signed off on by the parents, if I'm not mistaken, as part of the application process. How do we know if students graduating high school in New Hampshire from a public school can identify those 25 states? When the proficiency rates are 50%, we are graduating students with limited math and reading capabilities based on proficiency rates.
Thank you, Representative Cordelli. I've got 194F in front of me. I don't see anything about, I'm unable to locate language that describes a commitment to a specific educational program or any metrics for educational attainment. And I know that you have some, I understand that you have some statistics that you've got about public schools, and apparently you're not very fond of your own public school in your district, but that's not what we are here to evaluate. We are only here to talk about oversight of the educational freedom accounts. And so I'm looking for, I'm in 194F, and I've got all kinds of highlights here, and none of it, where is the requirement that we provide, that parents provide an education? What does that look like? What is education? We didn't, it's not even defined. Unless you know where it is, tell me where it is.
Okay, I have a question for you, Senator Altshuler.
Yes, ma'am.
When you talk about this is our purview, we have to look at this thing. Are
Yes.
you only interested in children who are able to go to an alternative educational setting that do it because they have the EFAs? Is that the only thing you're interested in? Or are you interested in any child who graduates, who stops at age 18 and what they have learned? Or are you just interested in children who happen to have tuition paid by EFA or help to pay tuition by the EFA program?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Since we are here as members of the Legislative Oversight Committee for Education Freedom Accounts, I am only interested in students whose families have accessed education freedom accounts. And so, starting with my very first question from the last meeting, of which I had many, how do we measure students whose families access education freedom accounts as having attained something akin to a graduation? Or are we just giving money to families to, do whatever they want until a child turns 18 and the money dries up? So what's the attainment? What's the metric? That I have not been able to find, and if it exists, I would gladly take that information from another member of the committee, or I would love for Ms. Baker-Demers to answer the questions from last meeting.
I'm sure if I could. I think I heard a comment that I evidently do not look favorably on my local public school system, and I would like to take great exception to that comment. I've worked for 12 years trying to improve education for all New Hampshire schools including public schools. In terms of knowledge, quoting from 194F3D1, the parent signs an agreement with the scholarship organization, one, to provide an education for the eligible student in the core knowledge domains that include science, mathematics, language, government, history, health, reading, writing, spelling, history of the constitutions of the United States and New Hampshire, and an exposure to and appreciation of art and music, which I think is a pretty comprehensive education, and any child with that core knowledge will do well.
Okay, now let's go back to another question. Senator Altshuler,
Yes.
you would like to have each child who has an EFA help to single out those students, regardless of where they are in school, to find out how they have, whether or not they have achieved the education that they should have achieved. Is that what you're looking for?
Thank you for the question. I would like to thank Representative Cordelli. I have now marked out in red section 194F3, part 3D1. And to answer your question, Madam Chair, in that section that Representative Cordelli points out to us, the parent signs an agreement with the scholarship organization to provide an education, et cetera, et cetera. How do we measure how do we find out that the agreement has been, that there's been fidelity to the agreement? How do we measure that? That's what I would like to know. If a parent is agreeing that if they take the state money from the Education Freedom Account and that they will provide education in core knowledge domains that include all the things that Representative Cordelli listed, how much do they need to know? What did the parent agree to? How are we measuring fidelity to that agreement? What are the metrics? What's the policy?
Mrs. Sullivan? You want to answer some of the questions? Thank you.
Hey, good afternoon. For the record, my name is Matt Southerton. I'm the Director of Policy and Compliance at the Children's Scholarship Fund. Hey, Baker was unable to make it today. I think I can answer some of your questions. The way that we would measure that would be the EFA law requires students to submit a record of educational attainment each year. The scholarship organization is required to report to the Department of Education on August 1st. All students that do not submit that. I printed this out for you. This goes back 3 years and it identifies the test that the students use. So I think you will find this information very helpful. And I provided copies for them. And we are also required to make that aggregated, non-identified data available to the department.
Madam Chair.
Senator Altshuler?
Mr. Southerton, of that, I'm really interested in seeing that. So are all the students that are enrolled in the EFA program measured in some way, via testing or some other way? And are you reviewing every student who's, is there a review of every student that's in the program?
So the requirement of the law is that they submit their scores. So there's 3 methods which they use, right? So they submit a statewide assessment, a signed evaluation of the student's portfolio work, or a standardized test. What we do is we collect the data, we aggregate the data, and then we make that data available for the department. We don't assess the data, and we don't give, we obviously don't give PII. We make that data available to the department. what is done with that data would be a question for the department.
Madam Chair?
Senator Altshuler?
Mr. Southerton, thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Southerton, I'm following you with, parents who have signed the agreement with the scholarship organization choose testing, which they then submit their scores to you,
Correct.
a portfolio,
Correct.
and
Correct.
the review, correct? So, but they choose who reviews the portfolio, correct? Or
Correct.
does,
It has to be assigned, it has to be a certified teacher, or a teacher that's teaching in a public school.
and to my understanding, please correct me if I'm wrong, the certified teacher that reviews the portfolio doesn't necessarily have to be a teacher that is of the subject of that portfolio or the grade level of that portfolio. Is there a policy within the Children's Scholarship Fund that a student that is, for instance, learning the history of the Constitution of New Hampshire and the United States, would that be reviewed by a history or a constitutional specialist, or can any certified teacher in New Hampshire sign off on a portfolio? Is there a policy?
Yeah, I believe that the law only requires, it only states certified teacher or a teacher teaching in a, public school.
Okay, so that teacher is not
It
necessarily,
doesn't
it's a
differentiate.
certified teacher in any subject at any grade level.
Correct.
And the
That's
third
fine.
thing, testing, portfolio, what was the third thing you just said?
Or standardized test.
National norm recognized.
Correct.
Sorry, didn't hear what, I missed that.
National norm recognized examination.
Okay, thank you. So,
And the department has recently allowed, report cards from a full-time student to be used in lieu of the signed teacher evaluation.
a
A
report
report card for a full-time student from a non-public school to be used in lieu of the signed portfolio evaluation.
Oh, you mean from like a private school?
Correct.
Okay, not a homeschool general
No.
report card. Okay. Okay, so, but the metrics of, I mean, it would, if a student who's 17 years old is taking a standardized test that's under the, well under the expected knowledge level, if they were attending a different kind of school, is that acceptable? Or is there a policy for, if you are, and I'm using this as an example, I don't want to get caught up in the intricacies, but for instance, a 15-year-old might take the SAT versus the NEWA, right? Because the NEWA is administered in elementary and middle school, and in high school, kids are taking the SAT. So there are different rigors of tests that are available. Are we looking, is there a policy looking to match that student with a test that is rigorous for their expected learning level?
Again, I think that would be outside the scope of our domain. I think that would either be the parents' domain. I mean, I think it's the parents that want this data, or perhaps the department, but again, I think that would be outside the scope of our domain.
Thank you very much. Appreciate
Senator
it.
Altshuler, are you talking just about the homeschool children?
Well, yes, I understand that. That was
That's part of the group.
Matt Southerton's assertion.
Because, the other children going to private school, obviously are tested according to the
To
school's.
whatever standards they have at the school, correct. I do want to make one point. EFA students are not homeschool students. I think that we have to make the distinction. The law is home-educated students, not homeschool students. So even though you enter the EFA program, a lot of them, maintain those practices, but they're not homeschool students. They're EFA students.
Representative Black.
And thank you very much, Madam Chair. Yes, there's 4 ways to obtain a compulsory education requirement in the state. Public school, private school, EFA program, or homeschooling. Now, I'd like to get into some of the business of what I did when I was a school principal, and that was test and measurement. The norm reference test, let's say the Iowa Test of Basic Skills, California Achievement Test, any of those norm reference tests, and there are a number of them out there, they're normed against a national group. It's just not something I sit down and design myself.
So we have over 1,000 students take those tests.
Exactly right. And so the results you're going to get are going to be normed results, norm associated results. Now, statewide test assessment, which we give, is a similar type test. So that leaves the third bracket, which we have, which is the portfolio. And the question I have for you, how many of our students are in grades K through 2 that are in this program, or K through 3, where in fact in K through 2 we do not give a normed reference test to any of our students, unless it's something the local decides to do, maybe on a key math or a NEWA or something such as that. But that's our Gates McGinney. It's something that the local school makes that decision on. So if you're having children that are taking an EFA that are coming from grades K through 2, obviously they're going to have a portfolio evaluated by a certified teacher. And a certified elementary teacher is qualified to teach grades K through 8 in many cases. So if you're assessing a subject, that teacher is certified by the state to give a norm reference test to any kids in those grade levels. So I'm a little concerned here that that we're really trying to nail down into the EFA program. The first two, the norm reference and the state test, those are already tests of which there's good data on. Many students don't take it because they simply don't have a test to take because they're in grades K through 2. Lastly, I'd like to ask you the question here. I'm looking at a report, and we had much of this discussed by Kate at the last meeting we're here. But we have a form here. It's a form which is done by the Department of Revenue Administration, and this is for the education tax credit. So I'm not talking EFA. But the scholarship organization has a mandate to return this form filled and completed to DRA. And when initially in this conversation we had, we were saying, how many kids have graduated? Well, with the tax credit, we know. We know that there were 35 that graduated and 1 that did not. So is that form also asked of the EFA program or something similar to that where you might have that data?
That's the ED05?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. I'll have to ask.
Okay.
Yeah. I also believe that with that, we also are required to perform a survey of the students. And
Yes, you are.
I believe that's required.
Yes.
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 Want to ask a question? Mr. Southerton?
Yeah.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. Based on the last meeting, there was quite a discussion of students in the EFA program who are LGBTQ and their access to institutions. Could you tell us, seems to me we talked about this maybe last term, but do you have those students applying to the EFA program because they were bullied due to their sexual orientation in public school?
Yeah, so I don't know where these claims come from because I've helped LGBTQ students myself in our office. They've come and I helped them personally apply for the program, and they've gone to, private schools, Catholic schools, and they're openly gay. So I don't understand where that's coming from.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Southerton, other than courses that are extracurricular, like driver's education, right? How do students that are involved in the EFA program also then take an academic class in a public school?
I don't believe we track the actual numbers, but what we would do is we could give you the category spending data, and you could extrapolate. And those reports are on our website under the financial tab. And we will actually be posting the 2023-24 year report here probably within the next month. And what you could do is you could look that up for all of those different organizations that you're interested. So like, non-public schools, private schools. You could look that up. You could total the number of orders and the total dollars that are going to those private schools, and then you could extrapolate like how many students go to that.
I'm sorry, I probably wasn't clear in my question. I'm asking about students that are EFA students, right? Who then subsequently go back to their public school
Oh, I'm sorry.
for a class, maybe
Okay.
two. Like, do we know?
Yeah, we don't track that. Again, you would look up the public school, and then you would try to extrapolate, how many orders and the gross dollars that went to the public school. And then you would try to figure out how many students.
Okay, so since there's not, a tracking, we don't really know if there's a specific subject matter that is,
Do they return from math class or?
whatever class, whatever,
No.
to meet these requirements.
No, again, I mean, the EFA is a funding mechanism, right?
Right.
And these students, they take classes at a variety of different, venues. They could go to a private school, they could go to a tutor, they could go to they could take AP classes, they could go to a college in dual enrollment.
Madam Chair?
Well, Representative Rowell, that is.
Sure.
Oversight.
Yeah. Matt, the form which we provided at the last time, the education provider vendor by category.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm looking at that right now, and underneath individual classes, curricular activities, program services provided by a district public school, charter public school, public academy, or independent school. I'm seeing SAU 16, Exeter Adult Education. I'm seeing SAU 23, my district, Bath Village School. I'm seeing SAU 39, South Haven Cooperative High School. I'm seeing SAU 65, Kearsarge Regional School District. SAU 80, Shaker Regional School District. It doesn't say the number of students, but it gives a cost.
And it should have the number of orders too.
Yeah. So I think that, the data is probably available. You just have to break it out of this.
Okay, let me take this opportunity to bring, I got an email from Representative Hicks about something that I apparently promised last meeting that I would do. And I didn't have it written down, and I double checked the minutes, and I couldn't see it in the minutes. But the question was to ask about private schools that receive EFA funds, and whether they comply with all state and federal anti-discrimination laws. Specifically, Senator Osterl asked about a school reference in this NPHR article, which we discussed a little while ago. I did send an email to the Department of Education asking the commissioner, either him or his staff, to provide us with that information, but that was yesterday, so obviously by today I don't have it, but it is in the works.
Thank you, Sarah.
Any other questions, thoughts?
Yes,
Senator Osterl?
thank you. Mr. Southerton, thank you for going over the portfolios and testing, appreciate that. And so with regards to the class wallet, in the way that parents access their EFA funds, they do it through class wallet. So is there a differentiation is class wallet administered by the New Hampshire division of the Children's Scholarship Fund, or is class wallet a vendor that the New Hampshire Children's Scholarship Fund uses?
So,
proprietary?
if I understand, so Class Wallet is a SOC 2 compliant, online platform that provides the digital wallet for us, right?
Right,
It provides 3 methods that allows, students or families to spend their EFA funds, right? On allowable educational purchases. 3 methods, there's the marketplace, there's direct pay, and there's the reimbursement option. I don't know if I'm really answering your question, so.
so you are
Oh, I,
marketplace, tuition, direct tuition.
yeah, direct pay, so the marketplace is the, Class Wallet has a marketplace, and it allows, what it does is it allows the parent to, you know, add items into their cart, and what they do is they'll add the item in their cart, they'll send the order to us, with human eyes, what we'll do is we'll take our approval checklist, the compliance team member will go over the approval checklist to make sure that it's an allowable educational expense, and they'll either approve it or deny it. And then those funds will be either approved or denied, and then the order will be sent and transmitted, via the internet, and it'll be taken directly out of the student's accounts via the Class Wallet. The direct pay method is similar in that those are approved vendors that have been vetted by Children's Scholarship Fund. And again, those funds are transmitted via Class Wallet. And then obviously the reimbursement process is where they would submit a receipt for an educational expense, and we would vet it. And again, I brought you the checklist for all 3 of those methods. Because each one is a little bit different.
Gotcha. They follow?
All
Yeah, so, just so I get it, you got the marketplace, which, so all the money, let me just back it up, all the money goes into the Class Wallet. Our Class Wallet is assigned to one specific student. If there's,
Each individual account,
each student has its own
individual account, so it's not family money, and that's sort of the concept that people have.
Right, it can't be, it's per student. Even if you have 3 students in the house, each student has their own Class Wallet account.
Exactly.
Got it. So they can use the Class Wallet to, if they are a student at a private school, have a tuition payment made directly to the private school.
Correct.
Okay, that's one. The second is marketplace, so they submit a request to purchase something.
Correct, like
And
they
then-
fill their card out.
And you physically look at these requests, see if they meet the criteria,
Yep.
and then you either give it a thumbs up or thumbs down.
Correct.
And then the third is direct payment. So if it's a direct payment through, and those are the approved vendors,
Correct.
if a family is looking to purchase something through the approved vendor list,
So say
does
there's a
that
school.
get reviewed also, or
Yeah,
is
all
it?
3 methods get reviewed, marketplace, direct pay, and reimbursement.
Okay, so you would be reviewing, for instance, Amazon is an approved vendor,
Correct.
but if I wanna purchase something from Amazon, it still gets reviewed.
Absolutely.
So marketplace is just for vendors that haven't been vetted, is that right?
I mean,
Is
they've been vetted by Class Wallet, however, we still have to vet every item or service that is submitted. So to date, we have processed over 117,000 orders since program inception, and we have rejected over 9,900 orders. So our rejection rate is approximately 8.43%.
Okay, so do you keep like quarterly reviews of what's being spent through Class Wallet? So it seems like there's 8 people in that are working at the,
So I believe that we have, I believe that we have 8 in New Hampshire, and then we have a whole application processing team is in New York. So I don't even have access to, parents' financials or the application documents.
but in the class wallet review of expenditures, is that done in New Hampshire? Or is that
New
done?
Hampshire.
Is that, okay, so there's 8 people reviewing every purchase.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Okay. And so New Hampshire's division of the,
And adjudicating,
Scholarship fund.
we're constantly adjudicating orders.
okay, how are you, what's the policy for vetting the quality of those expenditures?
So,
Not every curriculum is the same,
okay, so we would not make value judgments.
Okay,
That's the parent's decision.
okay,
So whether, if you want to, we don't make value judgments on it. If you have a math book that you believe is right for your student, that's your decision, that's the parent's decision. We assess orders according to these criteria here and the different methods. So what we're interested, is it an educational expense? And then we document the core knowledge domain that it represents.
and the educational expense, like, what does it mean by educational expenses on those documents?
Correct, so
Yeah,
we're not
thank
gonna approve, socks, and we're not gonna approve jet skis, and we're not gonna approve machine guns, something like that. We're gonna approve pens and pencils and notebooks and math books and, tuition. We're not gonna approve, we have a prohibited items list, and then each August, what we'll do is we'll update the parent handbook, we'll update our policies, we'll update our provider handbook, we're actually doing that right now. So all of this will be updated at the end of this month.
So there is a policy of prohibited items?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, and then if it's not on the prohibited items list, it's up for review using the criteria that are on.
Absolutely, and you'll see the categories there as well. So when you look at the prohibited items list, look at the categories, you'll see, household items. It couldn't possibly be exhaustive. I can't create an exhaustive list of, all household items, right? But we do try to give guidance.
Thank you, that actually
Absolutely.
clarifies
I do
a
want
lot
to
in that
mention one
process.
caveat, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to monopolize your time.
No, please, actually, it's really super helpful.
Oh, okay, oh, great.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so if a student has an IEP or an ISP, so there was, I can't identify her, but there was a student that was blind and deaf, and we did allow them to have like a little handheld mixer because in her IEP called for manipulatives. So we would call that a variance, and we documented it to the IEP, and we did allow that. So that would be considered a household item that we initially rejected, but then after we documented it to the IEP, we did allow that.
What's that?
I'm ready to move on to my next question. Like, I'm all set with the class wallet, that was incredibly helpful to understand how that program works.
Do that. Anybody else has a question? You have a question? Okay, then, Senator Alston, what is your next question?
So we know, we've had, evidence shown to us, and, if everyone on the committee has not seen it, I will absolutely pass it along, that there are a number of private schools in the state of New Hampshire who have now changed their financial aid policies to reflect, the EFA program, and are requiring families who apply for financial aid to their programs to first get their EFA state money before they may apply for financial aid from another program. And they have subsequently hired staff to manage helping families access EFA money to apply towards this tuition. This is a very common practice in a certain segment of the private school world. I'm happy to share that with you. So are you keeping track of how many private schools that the EFA program is sending tuition payment to, that require EFAs to be applied before they can access any other tuition? Are you aware
No, I was
that the
not
program
even-
is being utilized like this?
No, I was not even aware of it. I would just assume I mean, we would just look at the category list, the vendor list, and we could just see how many students use it at that.
Right.
But I mean, I was not aware of that. And we couldn't, what I would say is, we're prohibited from even giving that information out, so I don't know how they would know it. Or you're saying that they are
I'm sorry, you're
requiring
prohibited.
it. I'm sorry.
I'm saying, you're saying you're prohibited from.
Yeah, I can't tell a school if someone has the EFA, that's.
No, I'm sorry, I'm not being clear.
They're requiring it, is what you're saying?
Yes,
Oh,
so on schools that are receiving EFA funds, and we were given the list of vendors, and which included schools that students are attending here in New Hampshire. When you go through the list of schools and you go look at their application process, they are requiring, if you want financial aid from their institution, they have now changed their financial aid requirements to include mandatory application of the EFA program. They will not give financial aid if you do not get your EFA money first,
okay.
and have subsequently hired staff to manage that part of their program. This is not one school, this is not two schools, this is well over a dozen schools that have adapted their tuition and financial aid that they were previously giving out to families to now incorporate EFA.
Senator Archer, will you be willing to give us the names of those
I will
schools?
be thrilled. I will send that and the links to those financial aid programs.
Because I think it's not unusual for schools to say, you know, apply for all aid that you think you might get before you apply here, so I don't think that's terribly unusual, but it would be nice to know.
Yeah.
If they absolutely mandate. And I was at an old home day the other day, and there was a tent set up, encouraging families to apply for FAFSA. And I had never seen that, so obviously you try to get as much money as you can for all kinds of places before you come to us with the financial aid, so. But it would be good to find out in New Hampshire, the names of those schools, it would be very helpful.
I will send that along. So, in reviewing those schools that are part of, that we tuition out to through the EFA program, what is the criteria that, does any school that's a private school qualify as an approved, I guess, as an approved vendor?
So
Are
they
called
would need to
approved
be
vendors?
approved, they would need to be approved by the state. So if they are approved by the state, then they would be eligible.
Approved by the state, through the Department of Education,
Or the Board of
the
Education.
Board of Education, I see. So if a school, going back to a previous discussion, if a school has demonstrated that they have violated, the Human Rights Commission statute of equal access, where does the initiation for investigating that and reviewing that as a possible, infraction of being an approved vendor? So if a vendor runs afoul of state law, right, does EFA take initiative to look into that or not?
So I think
Is there a policy?
I think there would be two possible paths. as you said, the Human Rights Commission, right?
That's
And
one,
then-
right.
And then whether the Board of Education addressed it and they pulled their status. And then if I guess there would be three paths, if there was a complaint made to us by a student. So again, we adjudicate orders. To date, we have not received any complaints from any students about any allegations. Anytime a student has requested a refund, the family has requested a refund from a provider, those have always been granted within 30 days. So that would be a potential avenue that a provider could be removed from the program if they fail to grant that refund back.
You said there were three criteria for.
Or three pathways.
Three pathways. Is that a policy or within the New Hampshire Children's Scholarship Fund, that there's a policy for removing off of the approved vendor list? One.
Oh, absolutely. If they don't refund within 30 days, absolutely.
Could we get a copy of that policy?
Yeah, all of our policies are online.
Okay, so the three are the Board of Education has pulled status.
So that is not currently a policy, no.
That's
not. And the
refund.
providers have to sign their agreement. I'm not sure if I have that with me, but one of the provider assurances that, yeah, they do have to. If you fail to, you can be disqualified if you fail to refund any overpayment to the digital wallet within 30 days. And there's another, and you also have to abide by all program rules, safety protocols, applicable background checks, and anti-discrimination laws. So if you don't, you can be kicked out.
Are you
The
done with
other
the
one,
question?
no, I'm not, thank you. The other one was a complaint
No,
made
I-
by a student.
Do you have a new question?
I'm still working on this one.
Okay, let me know when you finish with this.
You got it.
Yeah.
I'm pulling out the BOE as full status, I'm pulling it out of there. Within the New Hampshire Children's Scholarship Fund policy, it's not refunding in a timely manner, and a complaint made by a student, not a family. It's got to come
Yeah,
from
so
a student.
that's not currently a policy, but obviously we would investigate it if a student made a complaint. Because you have to abide by all safety protocols, applicable background checks, and any applicable anti-discrimination laws. So we would definitely have to review that if someone brought a complaint forward.
So the issue with, a red flag being blown up about the St. Benedict Center slaves of the Immaculate Heart of Mary School in Richmond, did that initiate any kind of investigation?
I mean, if they're a state-approved school, no, and again, I would be the one that would be receiving the complaints, and I am not receiving any.
But that complaint has to come from a student
I would assume, yeah, a student or a family.
or a family.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, for sure.
Okay. So does the Children's Scholarship Fund plan on communicating with the school and investigating, like, why there are these red flags being flown up? Or you gotta wait for,
Yeah, I mean, I would wait for the Human Rights Commission and the Board of Education, barring a student or a family reaching out to us. Again, I personally helped LGBTQ students, register for the EFA program, openly gay students that go to, private schools that have been bullied. I went to public schools. I have a family that are public school administrators, public school teachers, so I love all schools.
yeah, this question wasn't anything to do with.
Okay, yeah, I'm not trying to
LGBTQ+.
find any other.
I was not going there. Well said, thank you for now.
Representative Dell.
Thank you. Just to be clear, Children's Scholarship Fund has very limited abilities to, I'm trying to look at to exclude a education service provider from the program, and you mentioned a couple of them.
Yeah, we don't make value judgments.
Right, but to remove an approved non-public school from being an approved public school, that you have nothing to do with that.
No, it's the, yeah. I mean,
Right.
it's-
And there are specific RSAs and administrative rules for the department in terms of approving a non-public school, either for attendance or for program. Is that your understanding?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Senator Marcelo, do you have your next question?
I am good for the moment, thank you.
One more question.
Okay, Representative Cordelli.
Thank you. We were given,
Turn on the mic.
thank you. We were given a packet of information related to a review and monitoring of compliance done by the Department of Education that found 4 or 5 items to be addressed by the scholarship organization. And based on looking at the documentation that we've been provided, it looks like you have indicated that you fully implemented revisions to address 4 out of the 5. One was marked partially implemented, and that had to do with dates on an application. Could you provide any information as to the status of that corrective action?
Yeah, I'm certainly happy to make it happen with you. Do you want to just?
One second. This is, I think, the last page from the corrective action plan.
Okay, thank you.
So you want to go to, are we on number 5 or number 1 on the cap? Number
Yeah.
5. So number 5 on the cap, basically the issue with meeting that criteria is that the database doesn't have a field. There's no way to program that field that when the application is complete in the database, it's a legacy database, there's no way to program it that says, you know, the parent has been contacted, batch emails are sent out to the parents, but there's no way to prove that they've been sent out to parents. So what we've done is we're currently developing a new database with a new provider that will include that functionality. And I believe that we are entering the testing phase on that. I think it is in December, and we're hoping to have that deployed in March so that we will be able to be fully compliant in the next application.
Thank you.
Are you all set with that?
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions from the committee?
I have a question. If,
One more question?
yes, thank you. I wanna thank you for your frankness and for your willingness to engage. If the Children's Scholarship Fund received information that one of the approved schools was denying admittance based on a faith, gender identity, disability, what would it take for the Children's Scholarship Fund to take that under review and review them as an approved vendor?
Well, I guess we would have to consult the attorneys and look at the law, but we would absolutely, review the claim from a student or family. Or
If this information is brought to the attention of the Children's Scholarship Fund, that a school on the list has a policy of not admitting students of certain genders, gender identities, faiths, disability, would that trigger a review of the Children's Scholarship Fund for their status as an approved vendor?
I guess, again, we have to consult the attorneys, look at the law, and again, are they an approved non-public school? Operating within the law, is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay, so.
What is your reference, Senator Ochoa?
I'm sorry. Again, if they're an approved private school and they're operating within law, I don't know what we can do. But absolutely, if a family or a student brings a complaint to us, we're gonna review it and see what our legal obligations are.
But it's gotta come from within the EFA program.
I would think so, because,
For instance, if I were to bring information to you, that would not trigger.
I mean, obviously, I will look at it. So for example, if we bring up, allegations of, misuse, we have a partner, we have, on the website, you can look under the EFA program, we have a utility there where people can anonymously use the telephone or online utility to report suspected fraud or misuse, right? So we will absolutely review any complaint that's made. I would sort of put this in that same bucket, right? We're gonna review anything, but again, does that person have standing, I think is what I'm saying, right? Do they have standing to bring an application? In your example? I don't know. I think that would be my answer right now. I don't know. We would have to talk to the department, we'd have to talk to attorneys. And I'm sorry, that's the best answer I can give.
Thank you.
Senator Ochoa, is this a fact, or is it a rumor, or is it something that you haven't heard about? Should we know what that school is, if I follow up?
I think I'm inquiring because I'm looking for policy decisions on getting onto the vendor approved list and being removed from the vendor approved
Because
list.
you don't have an actual case.
We discussed red flags that went up for a particular school.
Okay.
And there are, I have received questions from constituents about what I have asked you. I'm not at liberty, if they wanted to come forward and ask in a public setting, they would, but as their representative,
Okay.
I'm trying to honor their anonymity and also get as much of the answer as I possibly can. So I appreciate your graciousness in coming at this with limited information. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anything else to say, Senator Wood? Representative Pinelli?
Thank you. Just to be clear, let's say, nonprofit religious school does not have to accept everyone who applies. And that, as I mentioned before, is covered under the state human rights chapter, RSA 354-A:18, exemption for religious organizations. They don't have to change their religious beliefs in order to accept someone. And secondly, non-public schools often might not be able to accept a student with a certain disability because of their resources. They do not have the ability to tax local taxpayers in order to get funds. So I've talked with the head of the non-public school association. I've talked with dioceses. They do their best to accommodate students. And if they cannot accommodate students, they will provide them information as to where they might look for a resource, a facility that will accommodate their individual disabilities. So I think it is, and let me just go on to state, the red herring that people throw out all the time, that public schools have to accept every student. It's not the case. It's not the case. Look at the open enrollment statute in law. They do not have, an open enrollment school does not have to accept every student that applies. Manifest education hardship. I worked with a family who was given manifest education hardship. Their child had a disability. They applied to the two neighboring public school systems and were denied admittance. I advised them to go to the Human Rights Commission because it could be a denial based on disability. They chose not to do that. But, so I don't want to hear the red herring that public schools have to accept every child. Thank you.
Any other comments before we go to the next point? Hearing none. Thank you very much. So, John, I see Kate Davis is in here. Do you have anything that you want to add? No. Okay, good. Anybody else? Okay. Let's look at the next one. Identify stakeholders who should testify at future meetings. Do you have any thoughts, ideas?
I do. I think, I did actually have one last question, if you're open to it, Mr. Southerton. Some of the vendors are approaching the, since we're 3 years into the program, we're getting to that space where some of the vendors have had more than, are coming up to $100,000 being spent on them, and that requires a bond, if I remember correctly. I'm looking for that part of the statute. Have you
So,
set that in motion
so
yet?
my understanding is the attorneys are looking at this. I don't
Okay.
believe it requires a bond, but they are looking at this, and the issue is that the schools are, apparently, they're not holding money. What happens is, so there's 4 disbursements, right? There's 4 disbursements if a student is in the EFA program for the full year, right?
Yeah.
So I think it averages around $1,300 or so per student. The students are paying either on, and say we're limiting the scope of this to the private schools, right? Just for clarification.
I think if I'm looking right now.
Okay.
I haven't got the papers in front of me, but I believe it's any vendor that has, that $100,000.
Significant.
Yeah, meets the $100,000 threshold of expenditures.
Okay.
So I think most likely looking at this tuition statement, it's probably gonna be a school, but other vendors,
So
they
say
may-
anyone over $100,000.
Yes, I believe that is the cutoff, is that when we hit 100,000, that approved vendor has to be bonded.
Okay. I don't think it shall, but
Oh,
let's set
okay.
that to the side. They are looking at this right now, and my understanding is that at least in terms of the schools, that they're not carrying that load, that the students are paying per quarter, because that's all they have in their accounts. Well, again, they're only funded, in 4 disbursements each year, so, if they wanted to use the maximum, they have $1,300. Or if they're paying monthly. So that's the issue. They are looking at this right now, but absolutely as soon as we get, final decision or they feel that they have a recommendation for you, absolutely.
So along those lines, in my district, right, I'm using this as a way to ask the overall question. With regards to the solvency of some of the private schools that EFA money is paying tuition towards, we had in my district a charter school that went under. So, and it went fast. And the solvency of the program was not evaluated appropriately, and that is just one of the issues surrounding that particular school. Is the Children's Scholarship Fund evaluating the solvency of these private institutions to make sure that when we're sending tuition money to send students to, you know, a particular, I'm looking at some of these schools, they're a little bit on the smaller side. Do we know, you know, that they're gonna, that they're viable, that they're gonna stay open and our students are gonna be served?
That would be outside the scope of our.
Okay. Okay, then that might be a question for the Board of Education, do you think, or?
Yeah,
I don't know, still
I
all
would
the way.
say whoever approves non-public schools, right, so the board.
Okay. All right, so that's not something that Children's Scholarship Fund evaluates in the approved vendors, the solvency of the vendor.
Exactly, I mean, if they're a approved private school, they're approved private school.
Thank you for that, appreciate it.
Thank you again. So let's go back to identify stakeholders who we would like to have come and testify. Any thoughts?
I have thoughts on stakeholders that I'll be talking to, might be to come, but nothing that I can identify, no, that I can identify.
Let's get that before the way ahead of our next meeting. Representative Knight, you have somebody? In mind?
I have some thoughts, but I don't want to say any names or anything.
Okay. Senator Alshiller?
Yes, so one of the reimbursement grants are due to expire at the end of the next year. And so I think that it would be appropriate to have some of the school districts that we received, this information from the Children's Scholarship Fund, and we know that some of these school districts have had a not insignificant number of students exiting, and what that impact is gonna be on that district, since that's part of our charge, is how it affects.
You're talking about particular schools, principals?
I'm talking about districts, so maybe from the superintendent's office, perhaps,
Okay.
or the administration, or the board, like the upper level.
From
Not the
different
principal
different
necessarily.
school districts.
Exactly,
Okay.
yeah, I think that would be appropriate, particularly since we meet during the day.
Okay. How about, what do you feel about next meeting day? We have 2 whole months, so we can think about it. End of September or earlier?
Perhaps.
We do
Can
towards the
we
end of
go into
September.
a Friday?
We can squeeze one more in October and go over the report.
So are we looking to, Madam Chair, create some, content for this report to submit to you?
We have to go, you heard the charge, we have to give what we have done, where we are.
Should we be submitting some of our
Right.
thoughts to you, to Coley, for us all?
We're gonna
How
write
do
a
we go about
report, and we're gonna go over it, and there'll be agreement or non-agreement, and we can work with it, and then that goes in, and we all have to sign off for it, and if you do not want to sign off on it, you can always write your own report.
Understood, I'm getting the calendar and our report's due November 1st?
The report is due, like, the 30th of November.
Oh, okay, that's 4 more weeks than I thought. I was looking at November 1st, so thank you. All right, that makes a difference.
What is a good day for you?
Would anybody be open to a Friday? or whatever on the weekend?
Depends on Friday.
Depends on Friday, okay.
You like it Friday?
Well, not Labor Day weekend, of course.
No, 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 no. I'm thinking after Labor Day.
So, the 13th or 20th?
We don't wanna do it on the 10th at the state primary.
13th? After the primary, will everyone be, rested from that?
What day are you seeing now?
The third, you do it on
Thursday, the 12th.
20th?
At
The 12th.
The 11 o'clock or.
I'm sorry, Representative Cordelli's the 20th, we got the 20th open?
Maybe at the 20th.
You don't,
Friday the 20th.
right, the 20th's no good for Representative Black.
Okay.
Representative Cordelli, can you do the 13th?
In the morning? 10?
Representative Hicks, how you doing?
Is that okay with you, Representative Hicks?
20th is better, but I can make it 30th.
So September 20th,
No.
September 20th.
Well, I had to get on each trustee meeting.
Oh, okay. I was looking at earlier at the 12th.
I could do the 13th, but I also got to put in a higher education study committee meeting where we have to report back from two systems on alignment. So, where we put this one, I put it in the opposite side of the day. So it's one
I
trip.
could do Wednesday, 18th. Or Monday, the 16th in the morning.
What was the 13th out of the question? Do you know that out?
13th, I have something I have to do with one of my towns.
Ah, okay. 19th?
I got a
Going once?
civics commission meeting.
I have John Carr and civics.
19th doesn't work good for me.
I can do the 18th on Wednesday. Should we send out a doodle poll?
I think that's great.
Let's send out a
Can we do
doodle
that?
poll, and then we can take a look at this guy, and see what's going on. Okay, doodle. Any other business that needs to be taken care of today?
Madam Chair, just a question, so to Senator Altshuler's point, was also a stakeholder that I was going to identify some of these school districts and how they're being impacted, because I think that's in charge of this committee. When should we get those schools to you? Like, should we identify them in advance, or should we just tell them to show up at the meeting?
When should we get them? I think that, when I can certainly talk to the superintendent, there's no high school district.
Okay.
I know school has this, well, school may be started, but if we give them an early heads up, we should be able to get a couple.
Sure, great. If you wouldn't mind, we'd like, Senator Altshuler and I would like to identify at least one school. There are some districts that were, or some districts, there are some that we're more concerned about than others.
Do you have somebody that you know what, that you think you could ask?
We have identified some, but we'd like to reach out to them before we say that they might be. So then, shall we let you know as soon as we know? So we can put it on the agenda.
Yeah, I have trouble hearing, so let's speak up a little bit.
So we will, if we identify and talk to those districts to get a representative to come down, we will let you know in advance of the meeting, so they can be put on the agenda. Okay, great, thank you.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
For Matt, when will you have a good idea, a solid idea of where your enrollment is for the coming school year in terms of EFA students coming from resident districts? So that we will have a handle like SAU such and such, there's 5, and this one 6 or 7. You might see one that has 30. Well, the question I would raise is why so many from one district? I would like to see some kind of a current enrollment effective, whether what you're projecting now, you're probably getting close to it, but it'd be solid, and when we collect the enrollments in schools, we usually wait until the the end of the first month before we got some of those real good figures in. So that's something to think about.
Okay, so
So let me see if I can get that.
you and
data
Kate
for
can
you.
get that together, right?
Yes.
And maybe have it to us before the next meeting,
Oh, yeah, we should.
okay? That would be good. Any other thing that we need to have? Okay, anything else that needs to be discussed, taken care of? If not,